And welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and it's a new week, and we've got another new rules article on Warhammer Community for the Old World. So, what have we got today? It is Old World Almanac Fight the Good Fight in the combat phase. So we've done the three previous phases of the turn. So we've had the strategy phase, the move phase, and the shooting phase. We're now into the combat phase. This is the last phase, a turn being made up of the four phases. So let's see what we've got in this combat phase. Right, so that's just the intro. Right, so you may not be surprised by this point to discover that the fourth and final phase of the game round is divided into 4 steps. Like so, all the other phases have been divided into 4 steps. So we've got choose and fight, calculate risk result, break test, and pursuit. As with the shooting phase, these steps are followed in order for each separate combat. It's too complicated to summarize in full here, but this article should give us a flavor. Okay. You begin the phase by choosing which combat you want to begin first. In general, fighting happens in ranks, and only the first rank of an engaged unit can fight. However, a unit with a wider fighting rank than its opponent can still attack with every model in that rank. Your troops surround and envelop the other regiment. That's really cool. So essentially what you've got here is narrow frontage units are now not going to have a benefit over these wide units by only having models attack on that side. So a narrow frontage, if you've got 2 narrow frontage units, you can go both of you after the wide unit. That makes sense. But here, wide units now are actually not going to be at a disadvantage, which I think is really quite interesting. There are plenty of wrinkles to this. Some models may make supporting attacks from a deeper rank. Multiple units can be engaged in the same combat, and any model that is able to fight without being in base contact may only make 1 attack. Okay, so you've got the narrow frontage unit engaging the wide frontage unit, and those models not in base contact only get 1 attack, but they still do get to attack, which I think is really cool. So, if you've got a big wider unit, you can still actually have attacks going in. So I like that. That's quite nice. Okay, fairly straightforward. Once you've worked out who can fight, it's time to determine initiative for each model and see who strikes first. Okay, so initiative is back. The model with the highest initiative statistic strikes first, and so on down the order, with a bonus for charging and a bigger one for hitting them in the flank or rear. Okay, so there's going to be initiative modifiers, which is also interesting. That might well help out those lower initiative armies that did struggle in the past, where they just were never attacking first. So that could be good. It depends how much of a bonus you get for charging. I think the charging is so the flank or rear, I get it. The charging one is going to be quite interesting. How that's going to work for those low initiative units. There could still be a situation, however, in which a lumbering foe like a stone troll initiative 1 may find itself striking second on the charge against the preternatural senses of a sword master of Hoth initiative 6. Okay. Interesting. It'll be the concern here is if you don't get this right, the low initiative armies, skeletons, Skaven potentially, certainly orcs and goblins, could have a real tough time if they never get to attack first. Okay, weapon skill and rolling to hit. Big news is that we're back to the classic weapon skill stat, which means higher weapon skill is better, and that to work out each model's roll to hit, you compare your weapon skill against theirs. The hit to hit chart is back, and it's as beardy as ever. Bad news if you're a goblin spearman, but fantastic for that Bretonnian duke who's about to skewer them. Okay, so what does it look like? Let's take a weapon skill of 4. Weapon skill of 4 is against a weapon skill of 4 is 4, as you'd expect. So it looks like if you've got less, so if you're attacking somebody with less weapon skill, it's 3. And no, that's half. If you've got less than half, it's 2. Okay. So if it's less, it's 3. If it's less than half, so not exactly half, if it's less than half, you hit on 2s. And then here, if it's even or higher, it's 4s unless you're more than double. Right, so that's the key. So the easy way to memorize it is less than half, more than double, equal or higher, and lower. Okay, fairly straightforward. And you can always hit. So even a weapon skill 1 can still hit a weapon skill 10 on a 5+. Okay, looks fairly straightforward. You roll as many dice as your engaged models have attacks, and with higher initiative models striking first, a charging unit has the opportunity to overwhelm its enemies before they have the wit to swing back. Next, you roll to wound and make armor saves as normal. Okay. It'd be interesting if you've got step up where the models move forward essentially in the unit so they can still fight. Casualties are removed from the back ranks. Yeah. Step up. Casualties are removed from the back ranks, representing the rear ranks stepping forwards as their comrades bite the dirt. Set every death in each unit aside. You'll need to top them up for the next step. Okay, so there is a step up mechanic. Right. Okay, calculating the result. Combats in Warhammer The Old World are usually decisive. One side or the other makes the breakthrough, and the loser is pushed back or breaks. Unlike in other Warhammer games, you don't flee based on your leadership alone. You have to calculate the combat result. In other words, you work out who's won by totting up who's killed who. Okay. It's not just about how many deaths you've caught, however. You get bonuses for complete ranks, for having the high ground, for standard bearers, attacking side and rear, okay, as before. To determine your combat result score, consult the table below, okay, so you get +1 point for wounds, so it's not models killed, right, it's wounds, so multiple wound models, essentially are a disadvantage in that regard. So it is wounds inflicted. It's a rank bonus. I wonder what the cap on the ranks is, if there is one. I hope there is. A standard bonus, a battle standard bonus, a flank attack, a rear attack is +2, high ground +1. That's interesting. Overkill +1 point. /excess wound. So overkill is when, or I believe in this case, is when you've got 2 single entities in a duel or a challenge, and one is a lord, the other one's a hero. The lord kills the hero who's only got 1 wound, and the lord does 5 wounds. Those 4 extra wounds would count towards that overkill score. Okay, add it all up and see who's won. If it's a draw, combat continues next turn, but if there's a clear loser, they must take a break test. This is a leadership test modified by how much you lost the combat by, with several outcomes. Okay, this is the interesting bit. Okay. If the natural roll is higher than the leadership stat of the testing unit's leader, either that of its champion or of a hero model that's joined it, then the unit breaks and flees. If the modified roll is higher than the leadership stat, but the natural roll is lower, the unit falls back in good order. If the modified roll is lower than leadership stat, or if you roll a double 1, the unit gives ground. Okay. As you can see, this is a substantial change to the combat rules from the last few editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Instead combines and refines a selection of rules from earlier editions and spin-offs of the game. It may seem complex at first glance, but it's a mechanic that quickly becomes clear once you've run through. Okay, right. Okay, so yeah, here's their example. Swordmasters, leadership 8, have come off worse in their combat against the stone trolls, despite striking first, and have lost by 3 points. They must now take a break test with 3 possible outcomes. Right, so they roll the 2 dice for the leadership test. If they roll the 2 dice and that comes to 5 or lower, then oh no, they have to roll. Hang on a minute. They modified roll equal or lower than the leadership. So they've got a leadership of 8. So you don't modify the leadership. You're modifying the dice roll, right? Yeah. Okay. So you're modifying the dice roll. So if the modified roll is equal or lower than the leadership, they give ground. If the modified roll is higher than the leadership, they fall back in good order. So essentially it's like you're adding 3 to the dice roll as opposed to minusing 3 off the leadership. So in this case, you kind of have to roll a double 1 plus 3 is 5. If I'm reading that right. 5 plus 3 is 8. So modified roll higher than leadership, you fall back in good order. And then a natural roll higher than leadership, break and flee. Okay. The natural roll, so you naturally roll lower than the leadership. Yeah, so if you roll lower than 8, okay. Oh, no, I see it. Okay, I get it. So, yeah, as long as you roll below 8 on the natural roll, you're not going to break and flee. So as long as you roll below 8, which is their leadership, you're okay. It's the point where you roll here where 6 plus 3 takes you, the modified roll would be higher than the leadership. So this table really is, this is a bit confusing where it says modified roll here. Essentially, this is a natural, this is all against a natural roll. And then it's only if it's modified beyond the leadership that it becomes a problem. Okay. Right. Understood. Yeah. Initially, you kind of go, how does this work? Is it modifying the leadership? And they're saying modified roll equal to or lower than the leadership. No, it's as long as you roll below 8 on the natural dice roll, you won't break and flee. At this point, if the roll is modified with the plus 3, goes above the leadership stat of 8, that's when you fall back in good order. And only if you roll a 9 to 12. Okay, that's quite interesting when you think about those unlucky combats with elite units that over time, a multiple combat elite unit should generally be okay. Occasionally they can get very unlucky in a combat, but it doesn't mean they're suddenly running and getting destroyed straight away. So I think this is really good, particularly for those elite units who just get unlucky and in the past would have broken, fled, and been instantly destroyed. Now they actually have a chance to survive, and just because they've had that unlucky roll. So it kind of removes a little bit of RNG, if you think about it, out of the game, which is not a bad thing in this particular example. So yeah, I actually quite like that. Okay, now I fully get it. I actually quite like that. Okay, next, we're discussing morale breaking psychology next week, but we can investigate the final step of the combat pursuit. Run them down. Okay, when you win a combat, you have a range of choices depending on how the enemy reacts. Restrain. Pass a leadership test to avoid pursuit and instead reform your ranks for free. That's actually really cool. So you do now have a choice to get that a free reform, ready to deal with another combat. Could be really interesting, instead of pursuing. Okay, follow up. A unit that gave ground re-entering combat a few inches forward. Okay. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then pursue. So if you win, you can follow up. Yeah, so basically, interesting whether it says re-entering combat. Does it just mean you're re-entering? I guess you don't fight again. So that we'll see how that one works. But yeah, follow up. So if you've won the combat, the unit gave ground, and then you can basically re-enter combat a few inches forward. Okay, fine. Pursue. A unit that flees or falls back. If you catch the fleeing unit, it's cut down or destroyed. And that's what we were saying earlier. If you got unlucky with an elite unit just on one round of combat, you could end up losing that elite unit to some trash. Whereas now you've actually got a chance, if that elite unit should have good leadership, you've got a chance of not running and being instantly destroyed. Okay, and then overrun. In the case that the victor has completely destroyed its target, it may make a full move directly forward, and if you end up in another combat, that counts as a fresh charge. Clever use of overruns will have heavy cavalry licking its lips. Okay, yeah. So this is where cavalry can certainly have an impact. We've talked about that in some of our faction focus videos, so that could be really interesting. The interesting thing about the follow up, so even if the unit gives ground, they move back, but you don't count as charging. So that would essentially be a second round of combat. So units that require the charge to get initiative modifiers, strength bonuses, that sort of thing, aren't going to get that. So this is going to be interesting when you think about, okay, the impact of cavalry against an elite unit. It's going to be quite tough, because if they're using lances that get a bonus of strength on the charge, getting the unit to give ground doesn't help you. Okay. There's plenty more to the combat phase. Wizards can use the assailment spells, for instance, while units fighting from behind a barricade or wall benefit from the extra protection. Hammer hand, okay. As the battle mage chants an invocation, their fists become like hammers, falling upon their foes with great and terrible power. Casting value 7+, in combat. A single enemy unit the caster is engaged in combat with suffers 2d3 strength 4 hits, with each with an AP of -2. Okay, that's not bad. 2d3 is nice. It's 2d6 can be quite swingy. 2d3 generally, you're a bit more. It's a bit less swingy kind of. There's not the potential to roll crazy hot, but still, if you roll 6 strength 4 hits with an AP of -2, that's pretty nice. But not overpowered. Okay, I like it. Soul Eater. The Dark Mage reaches out a hand to tear at the very soul of their enemy. A single enemy model the caster is engaged in combat with suffers a single strength 3 hit with the multiple wounds 3 special rule, and with no armor save permitted. Okay, again, not crazy overpowered, quite nice against a character. Doesn't say, it just says engaged in combat with, doesn't say in base contact. Warden regeneration saves can be attempted as normal. I just hope that you don't end up with sniping characters out of units too much. Okay, but yeah, not too bad. But strength 3 is not that bad. But it's the multiple wounds 3, so no armor saves permitted. You could quite easily snipe a character out of a unit because it doesn't say base to base contact. Okay, That's it for this week's rules snapshot from Warhammer The Old World. Okay. So, in terms of this, the combat phase is way more in-depth. It always is going to be, because of the amount of different scenarios that can happen, the different results and everything else. So you're never going to get a full article detailing everything, right? It's just not going to happen. So it gives us a flavour, exactly as the article said. They made that clear at the beginning, which was great. They made it clear, right? This is going to give you a flavour of how combat looks. This is how the combat result stuff looks. Overall, everything I've seen in here looks good. Pleased with a lot of stuff. I like the weapon skill chart. I like the pushback, essentially mechanic. I think the initiative thing is one to watch out for. Is just to ensure that lower initiative armies aren't always striking last and getting crushed, which would be a problem for them. Like, how do you then make sure that army is competitive? So that's the only thing I think on there that I have not worry about, but a question in how is it going to be managed. And everything else, combat result, all that seems great. Break test, now we've worked out what they mean, and we've read it through a few times, got it clear in our mind. I'm pretty sure that's what that looks like. And I think that's a benefit to these elite units that got unlucky in the past and then instantly destroyed. So overall, a good article. There's a lot there. In terms of, this is one of these things where you really need to play a few games. We need to see the whole rules as well. We've still got the psychology stuff, which is coming next week. So again, we're still taking this in isolation. There's clearly a lot of rules missing from this as well. And you don't even know what unit rules look like. We haven't seen, I don't think, a single unit set of rules. So you don't really know how how units rules are going to pan out against the actual rule set itself. So lots still to go. So that you can't make judgment on, is this a good game or a bad game. There's nothing in that I've read so far in any of these rules articles that would say, "Oh no, this is terrible. The sky's falling in," and everything else. So far, everything I've read is positive in my mind. We need to put it all together. We need to see how it plays out on the tabletop before you can make that final judgment. But overall, I'm absolutely positive about everything I've read so far. And there you go. That is the last of the turn phase articles. Next week there will be an article on psychology, and we'll be covering that one as well. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, please hit that subscribe button. It's free for you to do. It means a lot for me, and it keeps the articles coming. So thank you very much for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in next week for a look at the psychology article. And in the meantime, tune back in nearly every day as we start to look at a Vampire Counts faction focus.